I love it. I love it. I love it. Look at this. This is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Hey, I'm not surprised.
What's up, the homies? Leighton here for UFC Gambling Addicts, back again for another UFC full card breakdown and predictions video. This one's going to be the Joker, Jack Hermansson, taking on the Italian, Marvin Vettori. Before we get into the breakdowns and all of that good stuff, make sure you smash that like button. Let's get the algorithm, guys. Let's smash the algorithm. Alright, enjoy the breakdowns. First matchup on this card, guys, we have John Villante taking on Jake Collier. And we're going to start with Villante. So Villante comes into this fight 7 wins, 9 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a striker. John Villante moved up to heavyweight recently. Had that fight with Maurice Green. In the first round, he didn't look too good. But in the second round, he found way more success in that round. Even towards the end of that fight, it looked like John Villante was going to actually win that fight, but Maurice Green, man, he pulled off that choke from the bottom. Quite a weird position to get a choke too, it has to be said. The opponent, Jake Collier, comes into this fight 3 wins, 4 losses inside the UFC. Had quite a few years off, came back against Tom Aspinall not too long ago. That return fight didn't go too well. Movement wise, Jake looked like he had quite a few years off. Tom Aspinall just sniped him. You know, it was just a sniper straight hand. Beautiful. This is a much better matchup for both fighters than their original heavyweight matchups. Despite how slow John Villante looked against Mo Green, I do think he'll be the quicker fighter in this matchup. It's a dangerous heavyweight fight to bet on, but, you know, I've got to side with John Villante just to be the more technical fighter. So purely for those reasons, I'm going to take John Villante via TKO in round number 2. My numbers would be Villante minus 170, Collier plus 140. And the actual line, we have John Villante minus 200. So a little bit deep. I wouldn't put him minus 2 because this is a much better matchup for Jake Collier originally than Tom Aspinall. But then again, also a much better matchup for John Villante than Mo Green. So yeah, minus 170 I'd say would be a perfect price. But yeah, minus 200 at the moment for John Villante. Damon Jackson versus Ilia Topuria. This is a good one, man. I like this one. We're going to start with Damon. So Damon comes into this fight 1-0 inside the UFC. Debuted against Mirsad Bektic in a fight where he was pretty much dominated in. Kinda reminds me of a Paul Craig type performance against Magomed Ankalaev. Damon Jackson was eventually able to put Bektic in a bad position on the mat. Never gave up in that fight and got his reward for it. You can only respect that type of performance. The opponent, Ilia Topuria, comes into this fight 1-0 inside the UFC. A wrestler and jiu-jitsu practitioner. It has to be said how impressive Ilia was in his UFC debut just a few weeks ago. Debuting against an undefeated prospect in Zalal, Youssef Zalal that is, and to perform the way he did just really showed us, man, this guy is serious. Wasn't able to find that submission win that he was searching for, but that kind of showed us how good Zalal was on the mat. Topuria, really high level jiu-jitsu guy. Zalal, despite the loss, really showed us he's still a high level guy too. So both of these guys are grapplers. They like to submit you. I think it might be fair to say that we're going to get that grappling match. A lot of the time when we have 2 grapplers in there, they cancel each other out, end up kickboxing. But if we do get that grappling contest, I think Topuria is the better grappler. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Ilia Topuria via submission in round number 2. My numbers would be Ilia minus 200, Jackson plus 170. And the actual numbers, we have Ilia minus 250, getting a little bit deep. But the debut, man, the debut was really impressive. Damon Jackson also, I mean, despite losing minutes in that fight, he showed us he was in a fight, right? You're not in a fight until you have to overcome adversity, and Damon Jackson did. Can he do it again? It would be very, very impressive, but I'm going to side with Topuria this time. He got me in his debut. I like Youssef Zalal a lot. I sided with him, but yeah, Ilia Topuria, potentially a better matchup than Youssef Zalal. But in other ways, Damon Jackson likes to be on the mat. Youssef Zalal will use that wrestling if he has to go there, but he likes to stand. So in a way, it's a better matchup, but also a tougher matchup for Ilia too. But I am going to side with Ilia to go 2-0. Jimmy Flick versus Cody Durden, and we're going to start with Jimmy. Jimmy comes into this fight 15 wins, 5 losses as a pro, making his UFC debut. Primarily a grappler, a very slick jiu-jitsu player, over 10 submission wins in his career already. So there's no secret what Jimmy is looking to do. It could be a good thing for him that Cody Durden likes to grapple, likes to wrestle. The opponent, Cody Durden, comes into this fight 0 wins, 0 losses, 1 draw inside the UFC. Primarily a wrestler. In his debut against Chris Gutierrez, he showed us his ability when it comes to taking down the opponent, working towards a submission. He had the back of Chris Gutierrez in that first round, but wasn't able to secure that finish. I think it would be very wise for Jimmy to look for that takedown, initiate the grappling. Cody Durden should probably look to kickbox, because if he doesn't, he's basically playing with fire. Jimmy is very good at finishing in those dangerous positions, so purely for that, I'm going to take Jimmy via submission in round number 2. My numbers would be Jimmy -150, Cody +120. And the actual numbers we have Jimmy -160, -170. So yeah, it's in the ballpark. Cody returning +140, +130. Again, we have 2 grapplers coming up against each other here. So there could be a round or 2 where we get a lot of kickboxing, but overall, again, if it comes down to the grappling, I just think Jimmy Flick is slicker. You know, he's more advanced in that area on the mat. Maybe not when it comes to wrestling, but securing positions and finishing in those positions, I'm all over Jimmy Flick here. Matt Wiman versus Jordan Leavitt, and we're going to start with Matt. So Matt comes into this fight 10 wins, 7 losses inside the UFC, I believe, something like that. Matt is an old school fighter though. He's been fighting recently, hasn't gone too well for him. Against Luis Pena, he was dominated. Not submitted though in that fight, it was a ground and pound finish. Against Joe Solecki, again, dominated but wasn't submitted. He was controlled on the mat for the entire fight. Correct me if I'm wrong guys, because I'm not too familiar with the early career of Matt Wiman. And when I say early career, I mean 2005, 2004. But I'm pretty sure Matt Wiman hasn't been submitted to date. The opponent, Jordan Leavitt, comes into this fight 7 wins, 0 losses as a pro, making his UFC debut. Primarily a jiu-jitsu fighter, a specialist. Recently got a UFC contract from the Contender Series, where he finished that fight with a head and arm choke. Really beautiful technique. This is a good matchup because it gives Jordan Leavitt a good opportunity to test his ability against a much more experienced fighter. It's also a good opportunity for Matt Wiman to show people, hey, I'm not just here to lose and pick up a paycheck. Jordan Leavitt is inexperienced and I'm going to show you that in there. It's a good fight for both guys, but we do have to make a pick. I think Jordan Leavitt potentially is the first guy to find that submission against Matt Wiman. So I'm going to take Jordan Leavitt via submission in round number 1. My numbers would be Jordan Leavitt -200, Wiman +170. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh on that line, because if Matt Wiman doesn't go to the mat, I mean, he's in for a good chance. Jordan Leavitt likes to submit you. That's what he's been doing. He's only 7-0. You know, he is inexperienced, but that's what he's been doing to his opponents. He's been submitting them. So would we put Jordan Leavitt minus 200 if he couldn't take Matt Wiman to the mat? Probably not. Now the actual numbers we have, Jordan Leavitt minus 400. Wow, Matt Wiman plus 330. So that line really does tell me that Jordan Leavitt is either going to submit Matt Wiman or he's going to control him on the mat the way Joe Solecki did. Personally, I think it could be the first time that Matt Wiman gets submitted, but if it's not, it's like double chance, right? It's like Joe Solecki just keeping him on the mat and basically trying. The line, in my opinion, a little bit harsh, but I'm going to take Jordan Leavitt. Smolka versus Quinonez. Now, I've already broke this fight down a couple weeks ago, so we're going to keep it short and sweet. My belief is Quinonez is a bit quicker than Smolka in a kickboxing fight. That on your bike constantly game plan is the type of game plan I think Quinonez will look to use. Smolka, in my opinion, will most likely choose to grapple, choose to take the speed away from Quinonez, take that kicking style away. A couple weeks ago, I sided with Quinonez as the underdog, and I'm going to keep that same vibe. Could Smolka potentially mix it up, get those takedowns, score on the feet? He could, but my opinion is Quinonez is going to stay on his bike, use a lot of kicks, and basically just outpoint Smolka. So I'm going to take Quinonez via decision. Current line, same line as we had last week. We've got Quinonez plus 110, plus 115. Smolka, small favourite, minus 130. The line is very fair. You know, it's a difficult fight to predict on paper, and it's most likely going to be a difficult fight inside the octagon too. Quinonez has good wrestling, so even if Smolka chooses to wrestle, it's not going to be an easy time. Very difficult fight to predict, but this is going to be my first underdog play on this card. Alright, the homies, you know what time it is. If you waited to smoke with me, amen. If you've been smoking this whole time, double amen. If you're not a smoker, but you enjoy the smoke breaks, triple amen. As always, I hope you guys are having a great time, a great day, a blessed day, spiritually and physically. I hope you're all having a blessed day. Alright, so motivation this week. I want to speak about something that I posted on my Instagram recently, so some of you may have already seen it, but a lot of you haven't seen it, so I'm going to speak about that on this smoke break. Physical discipline, guys. I think it's important to be doing some kind of physical activity. It can be anything too, right? It doesn't have to be MMA training. I know this is an MMA channel, but physical activity can be anything. It doesn't have to be MMA training. Anything that gives you that feeling of, man, this is hard to keep going. This is hard to keep going. It's a tough feeling, right? But that feeling is a very, very good feeling, man. Like I said, it is a tough feeling, but it's a good feeling to embrace. You're basically training yourself to be a tougher person than what you already are. And that's before we even get into the health benefits, you know, the physical benefits. It's physically and mentally healthy for everyone to be working out. So for all of those who, you know, are listening to this and you've been off of that activity that you like to do, hopefully that message today will, you know, give you something to think about, you know, whether it's, man, I should start running again, or I should start playing football again. I should start bodybuilding again. Whatever it is that you like to do, if you're not on it, get on it. And for those of you that are on it, keep up the grind. Keep pushing yourself every day. You know, the activity that you choose to do, day by day, week by week, month by month, it gets easier. So you have to push harder. Those of you that are just returning, it's not going to be so hard to fatigue you. It's not going to be so hard to get to that point of, man, this is hard, right? You're going to get there pretty easy on day one, but after a month, after 2 months, it should be getting quite difficult now. You're pushing yourself even further. That type of mental and physical toughness is good for everyone. So if you're not on it, get on it. If you're on it, keep going. And that's an amen, alright? That's an amen from the whole gang. Now, last week, man, we have to speak about Anthony Smith, Lionheart, right? He was thrown into the main event spot, very short notice, and man, he got it done. He got it done, guys. We have to really appreciate that performance. He's had a few losses recently, but that was a clean one. That was a very, very clean performance. Devin Clark didn't arise to the occasion. He will be back, but yeah, credit to Anthony Smith. Alright homies, if you've enjoyed the smoke break and you haven't hit the Hamzat button, make sure you do that. If you're not subscribed, you know what to do. Alright, enjoy the main event breakdowns. Movsar Evloev versus Nate Landwehr, and we're going to start with Evloev. So Evloev comes into this fight 3-0 inside the UFC. This fighter is one to watch, guys. Gives me the early Figueiredo vibes. Potential champion in the future, if he continues to improve. As of right now, he's a very skillful wrestler. His kickboxing is very technical too. Powerful and quick. He's really a prospect in the division. The opponent, Nate Landwehr, comes into this fight 1 win, 1 loss inside the UFC. Badly knocked out in his UFC debut. Against Darren Elkins, he basically showed us that he's a madman. Took a lot of punches, gave out a lot of punches too. He enjoyed a 15-minute war with Darren Elkins. How many fighters can say that? You know, how many fighters can really say they enjoyed a 15-minute war with Darren Elkins? Not many. The difference in this fight, in my opinion, is Evloev probably isn't going to engage in a warlike type fight. I'd say he wrestles when the time is right, looks to fatigue Nate with some grappling, maybe even looks to kickbox with Nate too. If Nate wins, he probably had success at some point with a heavy bomb, but I'm going to side with the fighter I believe has more skill, and that's Evloev. So I'm going to take Evloev via decision. My numbers would be Evloev minus 250 because he is very well rounded, he is very skillful. Nate plus 220. And Evloev is a minus 650, which is crazy. I mean, he is very skillful, he is a prospect, but Nate Landwehr, he is tough. You know, he isn't going to give up. He is not going to give up. To see Nate lose, it looks like the debut, right, against Burns. You're going to have to do something like that, or you're going to have to work towards a submission. Evloev could do that. He could work towards a sub, or he could go 15 minutes and just show his ability, but minus 650, that is a deep one. Roman Dolidze versus John Allan, and we're going to start with Roman. So Roman comes into this fight 1-0 inside the UFC. His debut was pretty impressive, man. Nasty head kick finish against a fighter that not many of us hold in high regard, but still a nice finish for Roman Dolidze in his UFC debut. Roman also has a background in jiu-jitsu, so he's got some skill on the mat too. Not just a powerful guy on the feet. John Allan comes into this fight 1-0 inside the UFC, but that was an overturned win because of a failed drug test, which means he was on some of that performance enhancing juice. In that fight, he was basically able to outwork Mike Rodriguez, and he was able to just keep going and going, which kind of makes sense now, you know? This is still a tough matchup to predict, steroids or no steroids, but I'm going to side with Roman Dolidze. I think he's more well-rounded, TKO, submission or decision. I think he can win this fight multiple different ways. For me, I'm going to take TKO in round number 1, but if he gets that submission or he goes to full 15, I wouldn't be surprised. My numbers, Dolidze minus 180, John Allan plus 150. You know, this is a winnable fight for John Allan too, but when you realise he was on those performance enhancers and that's why the win was overturned, now you start to question, can you go like that without the juice? I'm going to say no, but we're going to see. Current line, we have Roman Dolidze minus 190, minus 200. So the line, I like the line. It's okay. John Allan is probably where he should be too, plus 160, plus 170. So, yeah, I think that's a bettable line. Moving into the next one, we have Gabriel Benitez versus Justin Jaynes. And we're going to start with Gabriel. So Gabriel comes into this fight 5 wins, 4 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a striker. Benitez is a powerful kicker. A pretty good boxer too. He's got some good experience under his belt at this point in his career. Had a really good fight with Omar Morales in his last performance. He's now on a 2-fight losing streak, which doesn't give you much confidence to pick him, but this does look like an okay matchup for him. Justin Jaynes comes into this fight 1 win, 1 loss inside the UFC. Had that awesome debut against Frank Camacho, where he just starched him real quick. Then against Gavin Tucker, it looked okay. It looked good in the first round, but ended up fading, got caught by Gavin. That fight ended via submission. If Justin Jaynes doesn't get this fight finished in the first round, I think it could potentially be a similar case where he fades out. Gabriel Benitez has some good boxing. He's a powerful kicker. He isn't the type of guy you really want to fade against, right? He's a powerful kicker, experienced guy, good training camp. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Gabriel Benitez via decision. Maybe even a late finish. My numbers would be Benitez minus 150, Jaynes plus 120. And the actual line, we have Gabriel Benitez minus 220. Wow. I mean, despite taking Gabriel in this matchup, Justin Jaynes, man, he shouldn't be around plus 200. I mean, this guy in his UFC debut starched Frank Camacho. You know, he starched him. Taylor Santos versus Montana De La Rosa, and we're going to start with the Brazilian fighter Santos. So Santos comes into this fight 1 win, 1 loss inside the UFC. Seems to be primarily a Muay Thai striker. In her last fight with Molly McCann, she used a lot of her kicks to keep the distance. Her distance control looked very, very good too. Outworked McCann on the feet for the whole fight. Very effective with what she was trying to do in that matchup. The opponent, Montana De La Rosa, comes into this fight 4 wins, 2 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a grappler. Montana has a pretty decent wrestling background, but it's her jiu-jitsu. That's where she finishes these fights. She much prefers to work towards submitting the opponent rather than ground and pounding the opponent. It has to be said, Montana has actually been pretty good. Pretty dominant in taking her opponents to the mat. Even in her loss to Andrea Lee, there was moments where Montana looked pretty okay. Looked pretty good at her game plan, but ultimately Andrea Lee also has that good grappling background, so couldn't get it done in that one, but she's done it plenty of times already. Maybe not plenty, but 4 wins, 2 losses. It's looking okay for Montana. Super difficult fight to predict. If Montana is able to take Taylor to the mat, she's probably going to win her type of fight, whether it's a submission or top control each round. Taylor Santos, though, like we said earlier, was able to keep the opponent in Molly McCann at distance in her last fight. So the kickboxing game plan has to be on point for Santos. I'm going to take Santos to do that again in this matchup. But man, like I said, it really is a difficult one to predict. It is going to be hard to keep Montana at the distance, the same distance as Molly McCann. But I'm going to take that over putting faith into Montana getting those takedowns. My numbers would be minus 120 for Santos, plus 110 De La Rosa. That's really where I price this fight. And the actual numbers are ridiculous in my opinion. Taylor Santos, minus 200. Man, that's deep. Montana De La Rosa has taken most of her opponents to the mat. Can she do that here? I'd say she probably gets a takedown or 2, but Taylor Santos on the feet, that's going to be my story. Is it going to be minus 200, that dominant? Man, it's hard to say that. Co-main event, we have OSP versus Jamal Hill, and we're going to start with the veteran. So OSP, there's no secrets what this man specialises at. He is the king of the Von Flue choke. Really should be renamed the OSP choke at this point. There isn't a fighter that's as good at that choke. OSP is very good at kickboxing too, when he's able to keep the fight at his distance. Mennefield couldn't close that distance, but when he did, there was a nasty counterpunch waiting. So OSP, you know, he's looking sharp with his hands at times, and when he can keep the distance, that rear kick of his, also a nasty weapon. You see that against Corey Anderson. Jamahal Hill comes into this fight 2-0 inside the UFC. I would put Hill in that prospect category, the same category as Evloev. Only impressive stuff so far from Jamahal Hill. His boxing is clean, conditioning already looks very good. I would have maybe gave him a slight step up in competition, but the UFC has different plans for this man. This is a big step up in competition. From Klidson Abreu to OSP, that is a big step up. For Hill to win this fight, he needs to keep that distance closed at times. And obviously, avoid going to the mat with OSP. Hill has a lot to do to have that type of performance, you know. OSP is going to use that rear kick. He's going to look for clean counter punches. And he will probably look to take Jamahal Hill to the mat too. Probably try to Von Flue him at some point. Really good co-main event. Winnable fight for either guy. But I'm going to take the up-and-comer. I think Jamahal Hill could starch OSP or even win this fight over 15 minutes with the right performance. So I'm going to take Jamahal Hill via TKO in round number 2. My numbers would be pretty close. I'm going to take Hill minus 140, OSP plus 110. And the actual numbers we have. Jamahal Hill minus 160, minus 170, so rightfully the favourite in my opinion, but a little bit too much. OSP plus 140, plus 150. The OSP line shouldn't be as high and the Jamahal Hill shouldn't be as deep. It probably will get a little bit closer come fight night. But yeah, man, I'm going to side with Jamahal Hill. I think this guy has a good, bright future if he keeps improving. He's only looked good so far. It is a massive step up though. You know, it really is. But I've taken Jamahal Hill in both of his fights so far. I'm not going to stop yet. If it isn't the right fight for him, if it's too high of a step, that's fair enough. OSP's a veteran. But I'm going to take Jamahal. Alright, main event homies. We have the Joker, Jack Hermansson, taking on Marvin Vettori. And we're going to start with the Joker. So Jack Hermansson comes into this fight 8 wins, 3 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a mauler. This man is looking to take you to the mat and smash you. He will even smash you until you give up a submission. It's one or the other when it comes to the Joker, you know? Against Kelvin Gastelum, there was no smash. It was just heel hook and be done. It was clean. Really, really clean from Jack Hermansson. Jack has never been the type of guy to stand and strike. We've seen the result of that. Jared Cannonier, you know, he showed us the result of Jack Hermansson being made to stand and strike. The opponent, Marvin Vettori, comes into this fight 5 wins, 2 losses, 1 draw inside the UFC. Primarily a well-rounded fighter. Boxing is what I'd say Marvin Vettori is best at. But man, his wrestling is very good too. He's been tested in all areas of the game. If there's anywhere I'm picking, it's probably at Vettori's gas tank, his conditioning. He seems to slow down a bit as the fight goes on, but that's normal. No fighter is 100% after round 1. It's very clear if Jack Hermansson can keep taking Vettori to the mat, if he can take him down, he probably ends up finding a finish. Either submission or ground and pound. But if Vettori can make those takedowns difficult, if he can actually use the fence to keep getting back to his feet, or even stay on his feet against Jack Hermansson, he could end up making Jack Hermansson tired. Both of these guys are top European fighters. I didn't want to see either guy lose at any time soon. I do usually pick both of these guys. Team Sweden or Team Italy, man. It's difficult because I do pick these fighters normally when they have a matchup. But I'm going to take Marvin Vettori this time. I have a feeling that his well-roundedness will show in this matchup. But if Jack Hermansson wins, I'm not surprised. I mean, Jack Hermansson is a mauler. He's very, very good at taking the opponent to the mat. Can he do that against Vettori? I'd say maybe in round 1, maybe in round 2, but It really depends. Can Vettori make Jack Hermansson work for it? Is he going to get back to his feet? Is he going to use the fence? I think so, and if he does, I think he can eventually find a TKO against Jack Hermansson. So I'm going to take Vettori by a TKO in round number 2. My numbers would be very close, man. I'd probably price this minus 110 each side. You know, both of these guys are European. I like both of these fighters. I don't really pick against them. And now I'm having to imagine this matchup like these guys are on the regional scene before they've made it to the UFC, you know? So minus 110 each side seems fair to me. But the actual numbers we have: Jack Hermansson plus 120, Marvin Vettori minus 140. I was expecting to see Jack Hermansson on the minus 140 side, but Vettori, man, he is well rounded. So a lot of people laying money on this fight are seeing that side of Vettori, and that's nice to see. But Jack Hermansson as an underdog, oh man, I'd say probably stay away from this fight, guys. Okay, as always, drop down your underdogs, your favourites, all of that good stuff, your main event pick, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Alright, peace.